In this video, Dr. Jordan Peterson explains why neurotic people get more anxious.
Now here's another thing that could happen. So we could say, well, the peanut butter isn't there. Well, first you're going to be surprised about that, hypothetically, to the degree that you thought it would be there. And so that's going to make you anxious. Because one of the things that can happen when you're on the way to get something you want is that something you don't expect will happen. That's novelty. That's novelty, or anomaly. And anomaly is the mismatch between the structures that you're using to represent the world and your actions in it, and the actual world. It's the detection of a gap between the state of reality and your representation of the state of reality. Now, the bigger that gap, the more anxious you get. Now, then you might say, well, how do you calculate how anxious you should be? And Gray actually doesn't talk about that. But there's a paper in there by Carver and Shire that you'll have to read that's related to this. So remember the hierarchy, right? You got little bitty things at the bottom and you got great big things at the top. And so you might say, you open the cupboard and the peanut butter isn't there and you think, this stupid family, I should go hang myself. You know, which I would say is not a particularly adaptive response, although it does solve the problem. What's happening there is that you're calibrating the threat as a threat to the integrity of the top levels of the hierarchy that you use to orient yourself in the world. And I would say that's fuzzy thinking. You know, before you hang yourself about it, you might think if there's some simpler things you could do that were lower in the hierarchy and higher resolution that would solve the problem. Like, well, you could go to the corner store and get a jar of peanut butter and then that problem would be solved, right? Or maybe you could just have something that wasn't peanut butter. And you know what I mean? You want to do a shift at the low levels of the hierarchy at high resolution because it's less anxiety provoking, it's less effort, and it doesn't take you apart. And so there's a rule, and I don't know how your brain figures it out. The rule is, make the least modification necessary to solve the emergent problem. It's a really, 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 really important rule. And if you use it when you're talking to other people, they will like you a lot better. Because maybe, you know, the person that's working for you doesn't do something that they said they would do, and that puts you in trouble. I mean, one response is, you know, you're a useless creep, get the hell out of here, so you fire them. And the other is, okay, tell me exactly what happened during the time that you were supposed to be, you know, outputting this resource. So you listen to the person detail out their psychomotor schemes, and you see where you can tweak one or two so that the next time that happens, the next time a situation like that arises, you don't get the same undesired output. It's much better, but it takes acuity, right? Because you got to turn the low resolution situation, which is I'm irritated and anxious and frustrated and hurt by your foolishness, your apparent foolishness, which is a really easy thing to conceptualize because it doesn't take any effort. It's just an expression of my automatic response. Or I can think, okay, let's constrain this, differentiate it, sequence it, and try to figure out where the problem actually lies. Now, if it happens 50 times, well, maybe it's time not to have a relationship with that person anymore. But to begin with, at least, you want to start with the smallest possible correction. And you can really remember this when you're arguing with people, you know, especially people that you have a relationship with. It's like, save the we should get a divorce statements for the serious occasions. And if there's violations, like assume that they're high-resolution, low-level violations, investigate that, and if that doesn't work, well, then jump up one level. But start low. And most of the time your brain is trying to figure out how to do that for you. It would like to assume that your stupidity is of the rectifiable kind. And I want to talk to you a little bit about how it makes that calculation, because it's a very hard calculation to make, right? It's like if you wake up and, you know, there's something about you that's aching. It's like, what the hell are you supposed to think about that? Because the range is from nothing, it'll go away in 5 minutes, to, hey, you know, you're dead in 3 months. And there's no real way of telling what level of catastrophic response you should have to the emergence of that anomaly. It's a real big problem. And so your brain has to estimate it in all sorts of different ways. And as we differentiate out the personality traits, we'll start to talk about that. So for now, just remember that your built-in biological systems are specifying the goal and the framework within which you construe that goal. Perceptions and actions. It's a little personality and it wants something. Okay? As that little personality is going along towards its goal, three things can happen. It can make progress. It can get stopped in a way that's easily rectifiable. You know, like maybe there's a toy on the stairs and you have to step around it. Obviously, that's not going to bother you very much because it just requires a tiny transformation of your schema, right? So, little things you can rectify might help. So those are little punishments or little threats. Or you can hit an anomaly. Okay, and if things are going right, that's positive emotion. That's extroversion, by the way. It's the same system. So extroverts, their positive reward system, the incentive reward system, is quite active in extroverts, not active in introverts. And then in terms of neuroticism, people who are high in neuroticism tend to react with more anxiety and pain to the same amount of disruption. And those are two of the first fundamental personality traits.